All right, so like I mentioned, we have quite a number of issues to discuss this morning. And as you can see, I've been joined by a very able panel of guests, and they will be helping us delve deeper into some of these issues. Let me just introduce them. Seated right next to me is Jesse Odro, who is a lawyer and a political analyst. Thank you very much, Jesse, for coming on the show. We also have Charles Kikule, who is a political analyst. Thank you very much, Charles. And last but not least, we have Murigi Kamande, who is a lawyer. Thank you for your time. All right, gentlemen, I'd like us to start from the story that we've just highlighted about the shutting down of civil society groups, including KHRC, which has been in operation since, is it 1994?
The timing is very suspect because if the last presidential petition at the Supreme Court is anything to go by, which KHRC and Africog were very much involved, and across the first term of President Kenyatta, they have been one of the fiercest critics of the president. And therefore, one gets a feeling that these two organizations, which, of course, it's a matter of public knowledge, that they were planning to move to the Supreme Court to challenge the president's election. And therefore, the moment you move in to deregister them, then automatically it means that they lack locus as organizations, and then to move court to challenge it. So a lot of politics can be read from that. Yeah.
All right, Charles, just coming to you. You know, there are also other critics who are saying...
Yeah, sure, Betty. I think, thanks again. And I think this one now reminds us of what happened just a few weeks before the election, where the National Land Commission listed a number of names, including one of the NASA principals, and it caused a lot of problems.
Yes.
But then it came to the public knowledge that actually it was even more names, and it's something that had been going on for a while. So my thought on this is that whereas the timing may be suspect, we also want to look at the need for institutions to keep on working and not be held hostage to political situations and even elections. Yes. To the extent that it's not just KHRC and Africog, which have been listed, which are under that scrutiny by the Fadul Commission. Yeah. We also have 487 other, and are really true. Then the NGO board has a right to do its work. The only challenge I want to say is that probably because of the timing, perhaps because of the lack of compliance by these two organizations, and then they brought themselves to the fore that they are undertaking some activities, yet they have issues that have yet to solve with them, then they just maybe self-implicated themselves.
All right, yeah. You're saying that they could have self-implicated themselves. Yeah. All right, coming to you, Murigi, and I want us to just maybe focus on one of the organizations, just take into consideration Africog. Yes. Africog went to court back in 2013. It was part of the case, challenging the results of the election at that time. And right now we understand that, they could have been heading to the Supreme Court to challenge.
So they were saying that it is just undertakes charitable activities and whatever lobbying they do, and they're not registered. So on that front, the only organization whom we know was deregistered was Kenya Human Rights, KHRC, Kenya Human Rights Commission. Yes. Now the other information I gather is that I don't know whether it was George Kegoro or Maina Kiai who confirmed that civil society organizations have been meeting at the offices of the Kenya Human Rights Commission, deliberating about the general elections as a whole. And from that, you'd gather that maybe they were preparing to file a petition, a presidential petition at the Supreme Court. Yeah. So maybe it is part of politics. I believe we cannot rule. But because of the timing, you find that now they have to play victim.
All right. Yes. And I want to ask about the perception that it has, because this has also created a big conversation online. People who are saying, why is it happening right now? And people also just assessing Jubilee administration's relationship with the civil society, even, before the election. What kind of perception do you think that, this would create? Because that's also a very important, it has been a very big conversation, perception, things to do with trust about this whole electioneering period. What does it do right now when this happens at this time?
I think it actually doesn't make Jubilee look in a very good light, especially given they have now trailed their eyes on Africog and Kenya Human Rights Commission. Like my learned colleague says, these are organizations that have actually fought for the human rights situation in Kenya. They're not new organizations, they are known. So if they are telling us that these people are not compliant for all these years, then it means that somebody, including Fazul Ahmed, was not doing his job for all this. time, including Africog, having run as an NGO. Now he's telling us that he's a charitable organization. So it means that even the Fazul Ahmed himself is showing Kenyans that he's incompetent. He doesn't know what he's doing. So it brings in the political gimmick that we don't want in this country. And then moving forward from Jubilee, when the former majority leader of parliament is elected, and the first thing someone tells you that we are going to use our tyranny of numbers presidency in the second term than the first one.
All right. Yeah. Charles, what kind of legacy would Uhuru Kenyatta want to leave? Because like he mentioned, this is just his last 5 years. In regards to his relationship with civil society groups, which have really, been speaking for Kenyans who cannot do it for themselves over the last couple of years.
Well, I think, speaking of legacy, President Uhuru Kenyatta during the campaign said that in the first 4.5 years that I've been in power, I've laid the foundation of what I really want to do for Kenya. And his biggest legacy that he wants to build is a transformed economy and probably most likely at the infrastructure level. This is something that he's been talking about so many times. But in terms of his relationships with the civil society organizations, I think we also need to interrogate these CSOs, whereas there are some which are really undertaking the activities and not antagonizing anybody. You remember that 2013, there is a number of civil society organizations which then abdicated their role as impartial political players and came in and aligned themselves to political fronts and even was seen as pursuing a certain political agenda, including even during the petition, which then necessitated the need for the president, especially around the ICC case issue, for him to come in and really, there was a form of a reining in on them to make sure that if you are a CSO working in Kenya, then stick to your mandate and make sure that you deliver that which you've really been registered to do, because some of them were working outside their mandate. So in terms of building a legacy, the next 5 years for President Uhuru Kenyatta as a president who shall not be seeking re-election will be maybe organization, then really it makes it difficult for you to work with any government.
All right. Murigi, finally, before we take a break, there are people who've said, who've asked, are we going back to the old regime, where institutions, like especially civil society groups, are being suppressed upon or clamped down? Yes.
No, you see what is happening. There's a section of civil society organizations that have gone to bed with politicians. And what you do, they act as politician surrogates. What you need to observe is in 2013, and Charles has put it so well, that some of the civil society organizations played a very big role in ensuring that, for example, they wanted to lock out both Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy president, Honorable Ruto, with the respondents in that case, who was Raila Odinga in 2013. So you do realize that there is a set of, and the players are the same. You will, I don't want to mention names, but you will look at Africog, you look at Kenya Human Rights Commission, you look at, there's another one, something justice, ICJ, that was also a key player that time. You will see that there is you cannot condemn the entire civil society, but there are certain names that always prop up. Yes, there are certain names that always prop up that are players in the civil society that you feel either they're not so much anti-establishment. They could be pro-certain politicians. At the same time, you also look at it, and I gave this example. As recent as last year, you remember there was this case that was filed about two other individuals. When the matter was appealed by IEBC at the Court of Appeal, NASA came in and joined these petitioners, and even the lawyer for Maina Kiai and these people was the head of the secretariat at that time of the NASA secretariat. So it becomes very hard for you at this point in time to distinguish the activities, whether are they working for the public interest or they working for certain politicians. Are they trying to pursue a certain political ends for certain people?
Many questions come with that statement, but also I just want to quiz you on that a bit. So are we saying that, are we likely moving forward to see institutions that were not very friendly to the administration get quote-unquote punished for, things? Choices have consequences.
Yes, choices have consequences. So it gets to a point, for example, and I wouldn't want to put it consequences in terms of victimization. I want to say, for example, let us also interrogate, is Kenya Human Rights Commission compliant? That's also we want to interrogate. Is Africog registered? those are things that we also need to integrate.
Right.
Because at the same time, we also need to be a country that is guided by the rule of law.
Okay.
We need to get these things right first.
Jesse, I see you want to respond to that before we take a break.
Definitely.
Yeah.
My learned colleagues know very well the angle that is taking that Paul Mwangi was representing Maina Kiai. Kamande, I think, as a lawyer, that one is a big letdown to the legal profession. We don't choose clients. Clients choose us, which you know very well. Even according to your political NGOs and other organizations fight for human rights. It's to do public interest litigation. And that is exactly what they are doing. So if they fail to do that, then actually they'll be absconding the duty they're supposed to be doing, including whether to put government in check. We have reached here as a country, not because of politicians only, but then because of the fight that human rights and activists have fought for and the media. But then when you realize that you have a regime that when it's put into question now starts victimizing people, then you should be very scared, especially when every now you're told that actions have consequences. There's no other way to look at the consequences. It's victimization, and you have to pay it. And then when someone, you have to pay the price, and someone has to flash the tyranny of numbers behind your face every time. Which my learned colleague knows, were very victimizing, not just on the media and the human rights organization, but for such things like this.
All right. Very briefly, Charles.
I think I want to say that he who comes to equity must come with clean hands. If you want to say that I'm being victimized, you have a case against the state, then the biggest question you want to ask, and the overriding question, is rule of law. Are you compliant? And if you answer that, then you have a case. If you don't, then I think we are talking about a different thing.
All right. Interesting. So I want us to just take a break, and we'll be having another guest join us, Sylvanus Osoro. He's the Member of Parliament-elect for Mugirango South. He has been with us here even before the election, and would like to also just hear from him what he thinks about this seeming clamping down of on civil society groups that they're willing to take. But we want to hear from you. What do you think? Should that be one of the considerations that they could be taking right now, even as we await to hear just what announcement they will be having for their supporters today? All right, so the cameraman really coming close to my face. Sorry. So we take that break. We'd like to hear your thoughts on it. Let me just sample one or two tweets before we wrap up this part of the show. Davis, you say our courts nowadays coincide with the accused to deny victory to the accuser. NASA should not play that card. All right, let me just look for another tweet here. All right, so Engineer Sam Simi, you say there's no need of NASA going to court. The road is still the same. Just project some sort of narrative about the Kenyan judiciary. We'll be talking about that shortly here on the show. And I'm lucky that I have lawyers here, so we'll be delving deeper into that. All right, so let's take the break. We're coming back in a few minutes.